Let me begin by asking the audience a very, very critical question. Raise your hand if you have ever gone out camping before. I see a few hands. Okay, almost everyone here. That's great. Well, that's awesome because one of my core memories is connected to camping. It dates back to the summer of 2019 when I was away from home for the very first time, spending about a month at the SHAD program in Ontario. In this STEAM initiative, I got to experience a series of firsts, including my very first camping trip. We went to the Algonquin National Park, and after a very long day of hiking, fighting a very gruesome battle with positive 40 weather, a lot of insects, a group of us sat down in the nighttime around a campfire and talked about nothing and everything. Staying true to all campfire traditions, we were roasting marshmallows, we were singing songs, and we were laughing to our heart's desires when all of a sudden, everyone went quiet. The only thing you could hear were the gentle sounds of nature. Some trees rustling in the background, the crackling of the fire flames, insects that were keen to make the night their own. It seemed as if every possible natural element was singing in pure harmony. And at this moment, I felt a very strong warmth in my chest. This was not a serious thing, but it was a very powerful sensation that my 16-year-old self could not even begin to comprehend, let alone voice it to anyone else. Looking back, what I experienced was a profound sense of inclusion. At that moment, our group was not defined by our more obvious differences, but more so with our inclusion and the shared experiences and the bond we were building. That, for me, is the true power of community. And this precisely will be my topic of discussion today. The power of community and what it means to build a more inclusive world. Keep in mind, though, I'm not a professional at this, I'm just a 20-year-old. So don't take my words quite literally, because they're not a foolproof recipe for success. Use them as a framework to begin your inclusivity journey. Now, on paper, my experience seems to border the too good to be true territory. And in fact, even I questioned its validity when I came back home and I left that protective bubble that I experienced for a month at SHAD. The only difference this time was that the fact that I could sit back and actually see what sort of pressure and division existed in our community. We seem to understand that inclusion is this beautiful thing and that collaboration is amazing, it enriches our society. We're still unable to embrace each other fully. And this is all because of the perpetuation of some social barriers to inclusion. Now, these barriers, they take many different forms. They include discrimination, prejudice, social bias, they include social inequality. And their impact on an individual is extremely damaging and anxiety-causing. However, there are a few ways around this, and we all can proactively work towards that profound camping experience. It's a three-pronged approach, and it simply involves acknowledging your innate scarcity mindset, embracing an abundance mentality, and leveling out the playing field. You have to do your first step alone, and it's not as scary as it sounds. It just involves personal reflection. But before I tell you what you need to do and what you need to look out for, let's actually delve deeper into what a scarcity mindset even looks like. We as humans often consider life to be a zero-sum game. That means if I was to make room for another group, I have to take away from another. So, for example, two of us can't coexist meaningfully and happily. And this is a situation that's cited a lot in game theory. Our scarcity mindset assumes that there's a limited number of resources and opportunities to go around. And because of this, the gain of any one individual or group has to come at the cost or expense of another. And this mindset often leads to competition and intense pressure, especially between young individuals who are just trying to all navigate through the ups and downs of life. This way of thinking is further reinforced by social structures, how we sort of assess each other, how we even try to get into professional streams of life. For example, if there are only a certain number of seats available in a prestigious university, chances are you're more likely to be competing with your friends to get in. Perhaps there's a professional field that only accepts a certain number of male or female individuals because of how it is structured and how it is portrayed in social media. That is how competition and hate and divisiveness are promoted, and social structures contribute to the brunt of it. But this is a mindset that is ultimately flawed and damaging because life is not a zero-sum game. And like I said, acknowledgement is the first step, and it just involves self-reflection. Most of us here are students. Let's think about a more relatable example. Think back to a time when one of your friends was asking you for feedback on an exam or an essay or something, and you did not give them your full thoughts because part of you genuinely wanted to get a higher mark. Maybe you were scrolling on social media and you found an award or opportunity and you chose to keep it to yourself because you recognize that you are equally stressed and you equally need that award, and you feel yourself to be a bit more deserving. While humans do not always compete intentionally, we often forget that our conscience is shaped by the sum of our actions. And these experiences leave behind a very heavy emotional burden. So instead of trying to constantly outdo each other, let's sit down, self-reflect in terms of why we are doing that, and try to work towards building a more inclusive world where we don't have to necessarily fight, and perhaps we can together lay the foundation of what a collective world looks like. Remember, creating a more inclusive society benefits everyone in this piece of pie. Making room for one group does not mean that we are taking away opportunities or, trying to harm another. On the contrary, we're making that pie bigger, adding a few more pieces, and actually exposing ourselves to a wider range of ideas, perspectives, opportunities, and experiences. This can benefit you too. By embracing diversity, a person's individuality, and providing equal opportunities, what we do is tap into the full potential of individuals from all walks of life. And we start to foster a society that truly thrives on collaboration and innovation. However, individual action is just the beginning. Your mindset can radically affect the course of your life. Overwhelming amount of research actually suggests that the mindset that you have changes the way you learn, how you handle stress, how resilient you are, and even affects your immune system. Stephen Covey, the author and businessman, and the author of a very successful novel called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he coined the term abundance mentality, which means a concept in which a person believes that there are enough resources and successes to be shared around with others. In other words, the world is full of opportunities and there is a lot more to tap into. So, after personal reflection, we just have to transform our scarcity mindset, tweak it a little bit, and make it into one of abundance. The easiest way you can do this is, really simple. It just requires you to step out and talk to your community members. Get to know one another and build relationships. Because this step is crucial for bringing us one step closer to building a supportive world. By reaching out, we initiate a process of empathy. We understand and learn from one another's perspectives and experiences. And this way, we begin to see that collaboration and collective work are actually not a threat to our success, but rather they instead enrich our lives and contribute to a more supportive environment. These recognitions and connections and relationships also help us to see the inherent value of every individual. We're all unique. We begin to appreciate the unique strengths and contributors that each person brings to the table. We can consider the example of a study group. People and research find that in a study group, instead of hoarding and hiding and individually studying, if you actually bring forward resources and try to learn together, you're more than likely to retain that information and understand concepts more in depth. This is really good because it also prevents you from procrastinating and actually keeps you accountable. But in other terms, in this type of environment, every member is benefiting from the collective knowledge of the group. This inevitably elevates the academic performance of all group members. And the shift in mindset brings about a positive ripple effect. We start to realize that there are enough successes to be shared, and by participating in a reciprocity relationship, you actually contribute to a thriving culture of success, and you also receive valuable support in your own endeavors. The only thing left to do this evening is leveling the playing field. And there are a few ways you can go about this. First, you can create your own opportunities. For instance, if you see an unmet need in your community, try to group with your friends, make a club or an organization, and see if you guys can collectively address it. One example worth noting is the Bear Clan Patrol in Winnipeg, Manitoba. This volunteer-based organization was founded by Indigenous community members. And the sole purpose was to address high violence and crime rates. The group patrols the streets at night and protects those most vulnerable from possible dangers. But the altruistic efforts of this club are not restricted to a specific niche. Instead, they try to support all community members. Second, we must understand that leveling the playing field is an ongoing process. For instance, there are already so many volunteer-based initiatives. For example, in Saskatoon, we have the Open Door Society that already exists and are actively trying to address problems in communities. However, because of the pandemic and just because of an aging isolation and an aging population, we see that these organizations again and again encounter shortages in volunteers. So, if you are not able to create your own opportunity, there are doors open for you to walk into. You can go ahead and help these organizations achieve their goals and try to make a positive impact that way. It's still equally important in measure. Now, let's move on to the third step, challenging and reworking underlying structures of inequality. While creating opportunities or contributing to existing ones is very good and it's very important, what you have to understand is we need to address the root causes of injustices. This step requires us to examine perhaps the systems that uphold privilege on their own. And we need to work together to transform them. This can be quite challenging for even the most seasoned policymakers, but here I am asking a bunch of high schoolers to try and do this. If you or someone you know is impacted by injustices within this system, then just believe that you do have a unique perspective and you do have something valuable to add to this conversation. You just have to research and try to make some change through policy advocacy. Research, understand, and support policies that actually promote equal access to education, healthcare, innovation, collaboration. And by doing so, we can help dismantle the disproportionate support systems for these services. We can actually hold institutions, policymakers, and decision implementers accountable for their wrongdoings. And this way, we can enforce equitable opportunities. Additionally, supporting and uplifting the voices of those most affected by systemic inequality is essential to changing the dominant narrative. Amplifying the stories and experiences of those most vulnerable and marginalized brings attention to injustices and actually challenges any dominant narrative that spreads around in the media. By actively listening and learning and sharing these stories, what you practice is grassroots activism. And it's a heavy word, but what it simply means is challenging the societal norms. You can build collective power and demand structural changes such as fair representation and inclusive practices within institutions that you most frequently use. The world around us is becoming more and more interconnected, ladies and gentlemen. And it is more important now than ever that we work together rather than against one another. When we create inclusive communities, what we do is actually create spaces for people from all walks of life to be heard, respected, and valued. We create spaces for learning to flourish. We create spaces for individuals to share their experiences and actually understand what it means to be human. And perhaps this way we can actually work towards that same utopian camping experience that I described. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have discussed what a world with inclusion can actually look like. Simply put, I have implored you to change your mindset, engage in self-reflection, and initiate important conversations. And this way, you can become a change maker in your community. As you leave here today, remember that the journey towards a more inclusive world does not mean you have to measure the size of your impact. All matters is the intention and the lessons you leave behind. So, don't go home today and feel overwhelmed about changing the world all of a sudden. No one here is going to stand up here and tell you to do that. Instead, take at least one step. See what your privilege is, what you can do to change in your life right about now. And take that one step, no matter how uncomfortable or foreign it may seem. The more you do it, the easier it will get. Embrace your voice, embrace your actions, and recognize your power. Today, you have the power to make a difference. Today, you have the power to build a better and more welcoming world around you. So seize this moment and create a world where inclusion is not just a goal, but a lived reality. My name is Ishita Mann, and this was my TEDx talk. Thank you very much.